Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 719, 719, March the 12th, 2019, Tuesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Alrighty, a lot to cover today. And of course we'll be naming the Dumbass of the Week for last week at the end of the video. We'll go through the voting tally. But let's go ahead and get to the important news of the day. Well, Sarah Sanders gave her first press conference for the first time in 42 days, which is a record. It's the longest ever, breaking her previous record. And if any of you saw that press conference, it'll probably be at least 42 days before she does another one, because Jim Acosta and what's her name? What's her name? I can't remember her name. They were both in rare form, as they usually are. It was typical of everything you've always seen before. And a Sarah Sanders press conference with it's like romper room, and you know, so I understand why she hadn't done a press conference in 42 days. And based on what I saw, a few of the clips, she won't do one for another 42 days probably. What a mess! You don't need to have those press conferences. It's a freak show because it's a bunch of Democrats asking questions. And that's what they are. They are a freak show. A freak show circus. And Acosta's a clown. And Amber Ryan. Is that her name? Amber Ryan? Yeah, I think that's who I'm referring to. Yeah, just the same old, same old. Don't need those press conferences. Just issue a press release and be done with it. Why give those people a stage? Next, we have Nancy Pelosi making a statement saying that she's asked about the impeachment thing, and she says that Trump, impeaching Trump is, she says he's not worth it. She's asked about impeaching Trump, and she says he's not worth it. Wait a minute. Just a week ago, less than a week ago, the end of last week, she was doing a presser, and she said that they were going to have to do the investigation to get the evidence to justify the investigation. She's also the one who literally headed up the entire outline for this Congress to facilitate the investigations that would lead to the information, in her opinion, that would produce the evidence they need to impeach Trump. This entire agenda. So one of two things is happening. Either Pelosi has realized that this is a very bad move, and she's been told this by enough people that are telling her, hey, going after this impeachment thing, accept what Barr comes up with or Mueller comes up with and what Barr tells you, and be done with it and move on and talk about the issues. Don't go down this impeachment path, and put a leash on Cummings and Schiff and the other idiot. Now, maybe that's what she's been coached on. Or maybe it is the fact that she doesn't want to talk about the impeachment or admit that they're out for an impeachment witch hunt in the House of Representatives while they actively go about doing it. And I think that that's probably more likely what it is. She wants to put down the rhetoric about trying to run these impeachment proceedings in the House, or running the investigation to get the impeachment hearings in the House. She wants to talk down the rhetoric while they go ahead and do it anyway. And I expect that that's what's going to happen, because I don't expect Adam Schiff, the bug-eyed fool, or Elijah Cummings, or what's his name, the crazy man. I don't expect any of them are going to, Jerry Nadler, I don't expect any of them are going to back off. I mean, I just don't think they can do it. I don't think it's possible for them to do it. It's the only thing that's on their minds. It's 24/7. It's all they think about is impeaching Trump, investigating Trump. This is all, and they've got nothing else. They've got no policies to produce. That they're not going to work hard on any type of legislation that they know is going to likely be vetoed by the president or never make it through the Senate. And they're certainly not going to work with the president to do anything good for the country. This is really all they got. It's about 2020 for them. They're in Stonewall mode. Stonewall the president while you work on your 2020 campaign. And a big part of the 2020 campaign is making Trump unelectable. I don't think they have any choice, and I don't think Pelosi has any control over these three. Nor does she have any control over these three nutty congresswomen. And it's not just three of them, there's actually more, but you know, the three main ones. So I just think Pelosi's completely lost control of this thing, and I don't really know, really. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So, anyway, yeah, Pelosi doesn't have any control over any of this at this point. She's holding on as tight as she can, I think, just to hold on to what she's got. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if these progressives don't stab her in the back at some point and try to take her down. Wouldn't surprise me at all. And I think she knows that. What a nut. Madam Botox. Well, it looks like Jeb Bush, Low Energy Jeb, his campaign has been hit with a $390,000 fine for FEC violations. Apparently, he accepted $1.3 million from a Chinese-owned corporation. Imagine that. Now, the Right Reverend Clinton, she received about $250 million from the Saudis, but that's okay. And of course, we know that Cortez, if what's been reported is accurate, what she did, along with her campaign guy, her chief of staff, if what they did, if what's being reported that they did is true, then she should be looking at $1 million in fines and 5 years in jail. We'll see if that actually happens. Speaking of Ocasio-Cortez, the wild-eyed commie, she has made another stupid statement. This time she says that if you don't have a job, you're left to die. If you don't have a job, you're left to die. I don't think so. I don't think so. With all the various programs we have, and we got a bunch of them, food stamps, housing, transportation, free medical, you can get on Medicaid. If you don't have a job, you're left to die. The only thing that jobless people in America might die from is obesity. We have the fattest, most overweight, most obese poor people in the world. You go look at the poor people everywhere else. They're human sticks. They're skinny as a rail. They look like they're dying of malnutrition. Not in America. Take a look at the poorest Americans in the country. Most of them are wildly obese. So if you don't have a job, you are left to die. That hasn't been the case in America since probably the early 1900s, before we had any safety nets whatsoever, really. And even then, neighbors helped people. I don't ever recall a period of time in America that I can think of that we ever had mass starvation. Now, during the Revolutionary War, there was an awful lot of hungry soldiers not being fed. But as far as the general public in America, I'm trying to remember, has there been any time in post-Revolutionary War America that we have had a massive starvation problem? Even during the Depression, even during the Dust Bowl, we had soup lines, we had bread lines, but they had bread and they had soup. If you don't have a job, you're left to die. Again, the majority of people, overwhelming majority of people who don't have jobs, who are living on the government dime, and I realize there's some people who have medical issues, mental issues, physical issues. I'm not saying anything about those people. We do need a safety net for people who really are in a situation where they simply cannot work. They have medical or whatever issues. But the biggest issue that most of America's poor has, and the reason that many of them die and have a lot of health issues, is because they're massively obese. Because they can take their card, their little card that they use, and they can go to the grocery store and buy 2 carts full of junk food. I know, I see them every week when I go to the grocery store. They're everywhere. I'm there paying cash. And people all around me, they use them little cards called the direction card, I think. They put it in there, they pull it back out. I look at they got 5 times the groceries I got. I don't buy any junk food, really. Their carts will be full of Cheetos and Oreos and this and that and the other thing. And they're like they weigh like 500 pounds. No wonder. All they do is sit around and watch Oprah and eat. That's why they may die. My God. Someone pull her off the stage. No. On second thought, leave her there. Leave her right there. Leave her where she is and keep her talking. Holy smoke. She's got to be a Republican plant. No way. There's no way. You know, she was recruited, by the way. Oh, yes. You didn't know that. Oh, yes. Cortez was recruited by a left-wing activist group that was hoping to get more progressives in and to take over seats of establishment Democrats. And you had Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks and Kyle Kalinske were both part of that group. And the whole point was, it was to find people like Cortez, hardcore progressives, and get them to run against establishment Democrats. Now, they lost. Now, 95% of the candidates, or 99% of the candidates that they got behind to try to win some of them seats, lost. Cortez, as far as I know, is the only one who actually won a seat. So she was recruited and then sent to a boot camp to learn how to do politics. Then she was given all the support, all the money they could muster. The whole campaign around her was all set up for her. She did nothing but answer the bell. And now look what they've got. The Young Turks. That's what you call spitting in the wind, my friends. Do you think the Young Turks are happy now? Wait till Ocasio-Cortez totally dismantles the progressive movement and the Democratic Party all at once and delivers maybe 3 consecutive Republican presidents. Conservatives. Oh, the court will probably be 7-0 by the time 3 more Republican presidents get done. Thanks, Cenk. Appreciate you. Well, we now have proof, as if we needed it, that the former director of the Federal Bureau of I'm With Her, the dishonorable James Comey, that his investigation was a sham. We've already known that, but here's some more details for you. We have proof that Comey did not obtain key information on whether the Rotten Reverend had been properly instructed on how to handle classified emails, but he exonerated her anyway. It was all a sham. A few hours after the Rotten Reverend Clinton was interviewed by the FBI, she had a phone conversation with CNN. And in that phone conversation, she said that she had never had possession of anything classified, even after she was shown many emails that did have classified markings. Remember, the Rotten Reverend Clinton was not placed under oath, nor was she recorded. She had all her lawyers there: David Kendall, Cheryl Mills, Heather Samuelson, Catherine Turner, and Amy Sahara were all present, all 5 of her lawyers. That's when she told them that she didn't know, when they were sitting there showing her these emails, 110 of them, as I understand, showed her 110 classified emails that were on her system, and she said, oh, and they were showing her the classified, and that's when she said, oh, well, she didn't know that that big C meant classified. And they let her get away with it. Let her get away with it. Knowing good and well that's a total, huge, humongous lie. Humongous lie. So right after that phone conversation, where she gets on with CNN and says, oh, well, you know, and keep in mind, she had just been through this so-called interview with the FBI. And then right after that, she goes on the phone with CNN, where she's asked about it. And she says, oh, well, I never, I never had any possession of anything classified. After they just showed her 110 classified emails. And of course, Comey and his exoneration went through the entire chain. We know that she had 22 SAP programs on her system. But after the phone interview, we have the text messages from Peter's Been Stroking Us to Lisa Page. And right after the interview, Peter's Been Stroking Us sends over a text to Lisa Page and says, he texts over and says, hey, you know, Hillary was just on TV, CNN, on the phone interview, says that she never had any classified information on her computer, on her server. He's a little bit concerned. And why is he concerned? Well, because at that time, they still had not interviewed the individual who they were supposed to be interviewing, who gave the Right Reverend Clinton her training on how to handle classified information. So that causes Strzok and Page a little bit of a problem. At which point Peter's been stroking us, says, well, how do we do an investigation after D, that means director, after the director announces we've completed it? How do we do an investigation after Comey has just announced that we've completed it? They hadn't completed it. That's the point. Comey exonerated the Right Reverend Clinton before he interviewed her, before he interviewed many other witnesses, before they even interviewed the individual that Strzok and Page were supposed to interview, who was supposed to have given the Right Reverend her class. And even Peter's been stroking us and Loose Lisa Page are sitting here going, huh? Did he just exonerate her? Are you kidding me? Aren't we investigating this? When did it end? Who sent the report? I didn't send. Did you send the report? No. And that's after his own general counsel said, yeah, the Right Reverend Clinton's guilty of multiple violations of the Espionage Act. Comey should be in leg chains. And God willing, if there's justice in this world, he will be. Along with his friends. So, Lindsey Graham is beginning his investigation. Now, it's very interesting about the documents that he first has requested. And of course, he's talking about he's going to investigate the FISA abuse. He's going to investigate what happened at the DOJ and the FBI. Of course, he's mentioned the dossier and all these things. I have a bit of guidance for Lindsey Graham. If you're watching, Lindsey, but before I do offer that guidance, I just want to remind all of you specifically something that he requested that's different from what anyone else has requested. Lindsey Graham wants the documents from the FBI and DOJ showing documents that detail their investigation of the dossier and the claims made in the dossier. So why is Lindsey Graham asking for documents from the DOJ and the FBI that he can read that will show him what sort of things that they did to investigate the dossier? And by investigate, we assume that he's referring to validating the dossier. Why is he talking about that? Well, because he knows that there isn't any documentation of any evidence, of any papers, or of any information showing how they investigated the dossier to verify it, because there weren't any. There was no investigation into the actual dossier or any effort to verify the dossier because they knew it was bullshit. They were the ones pushing it. They were the ones pipelining it. Lindsey Graham, that's a pretty smart move on Lindsey's part, because that creates a real problem, because most of the people who were involved in all that are mostly gone. So when Lindsey Graham gets a note back from the DOJ and the FBI and they say, well, we've been looking around. Hell, there are no documents about how they investigated the dossier to attempt to verify it. There is none. He already knows that. He already knows that that there was no investigation or no trying to verify the dossier. They knew it was bullshit from day one. They knew exactly who paid for it. They knew who was behind it. They knew who wrote it. They knew who the sources were or were not. They understood all that. And Lindsey Graham knows that. Now, he is focusing on the dossier. And that's important because that's the very first thing that you have to deal with in this whole matter, as I've been saying. So, why is that important? Well, because if you look at what McCabe just did on TV a week ago, defending the dossier, we had Comey on with Brett Baier defending the dossier. We have essentially Brennan, who doesn't really use the word dossier, but the information that was in the dossier. We have Clapper. We have all these guys. They really can't come out and deep six the dossier. They have to continue to defend it because just as Nunes has been trying to tell us for 2 years, it's all they had. The dossier was what they had. It's what they used to launch multiple investigations, 5 that we know of, to get FISA warrants, to put agent provocateurs into the campaign, to do thousands of unmaskings of Trump's campaign people. They did all that with the dossier, knowing it was bullshit. So then, if you remember back in the late spring of last year, the dossier was just being shredded. It was just being destroyed. And what did they do? They went to their fallback position to have New York Times write a story saying, well, it wasn't the dossier. No, it was actually the Papadopoulos and Downer meeting. But then we found out that Papadopoulos basically said, hey, I don't even remember talking about Clinton emails or the campaign in that conversation with Downer. And Downer is saying, well, yeah, Papadopoulos told me that Russians had some dirt on Hillary, but nothing about emails. Didn't use the word emails. Didn't use the word hacked emails or blackmail against Trump or anything else. The only thing that Downer says is that Papadopoulos said something to him about the Russians may have some dirt on Hillary. That's it. Nothing about emails. And Papadopoulos to this day says that didn't even happen. He says, I remember that conversation with Downer pretty well. I don't think we talked about Hillary, emails, WikiLeaks, or anything else, or Russia, or any of that other stuff. He said, we were talking about oil and gas in the Middle East, in Turkey, and Israel, and places like that. It was a foreign policy discussion, and of course he did get on me, jumped on me for writing this article that I wrote. And that was mostly what the conversation with Downer was about. So once that totally got exposed and they could no longer fall back on the Papadopoulos and Downer, and especially now that Papadopoulos got 2 weeks in jail for lying about when he met with Misfit, and there's no ties to him being involved in any Trump, Russia, Putin collusion or anything like that, they had to go back to the dossier because the dossier is all they've got. And they have to keep defending it, but it's indefensible. And that's why Lindsey Graham requested those documents that will show that they never made any effort to try to validate or verify the dossier, because they knew from the very beginning it was bullshit. So what Lindsey Graham must do is they must finally, before they move on to anything else, before you move on to FISA, because when you get to FISA, they're going to say, well, we had this information, and it's a dossier. Everything that they did is going to be backed by the dossier. So the very first thing that Lindsey Graham needs to do is they finally need to air out the dossier. Totally air it out. That means they got to get Christopher Steele on record, and if that means putting him in front of a federal grand jury, then that's what they have to do. But they need to get everyone who participated in writing the dossier, providing information for the dossier, everyone who handled the dossier, everyone who transferred or moved the dossier, and that's a lot of people. We're talking 40, 50 people. All need to be brought in, and they need to get to the bottom of who wrote the dossier, who were the sources for the dossier, and basically to that. And as you know, as I've been saying on this channel now for a very long time, you're going to find that these so-called Russians, sources of the dossier, were not insiders inside of Putin's government. They weren't intelligence officials. They weren't anything having to do with any current Russian government officials. These so-called Russians were Milian, who's a Russian, but he's been living in New York for years, has no connection to the Putin government whatsoever. You have Deripaska, who's more connected to the FBI and Clinton. You have Mr. Akhmechan, who's all his associates are Clinton insiders. Vetselnitskaya was a Russian lawyer working for a Russian prosecutor and Fusion GPS was hired by the Russians to represent this prosecutor in the Magnitsky Act. And Akhmechan and Vetselnitskaya were both working on that. There were no Russians in the Putin administration. There were no Russians in the intelligence. None of that is true. It's all bullshit. These Russians are all the same Russians we've been talking about, and none of them are connected intelligence officials who have anything to do with Putin's government. It's all bullshit, and they knew it. So that begs the answer. That begs the answer. The question. Who is the author of the dossier? Who wrote it? And who were the sources? Well, as you know, I talk about it all the time here. And I'm telling you, I think, for the most part, Glenn Simpson and his wife, Mary Jacoby, were the primary authors, the narrators of the dossier. And they used Nellie Orr to do some research. They had Christopher Steele, who was nothing more than the person to give it the credibility. and the person who could move it through various pipelines, through the State Department, the FBI, the media, and everywhere else. Then they had Mr. Baumgartner, who actually speaks fluent Russian, and his company is exactly like, they're like the British version of Confusion GPS. Very close friend of Glenn Simpson's. So Simpson is basically, and his wife, are essentially writing the dossier. They got Nellie Orr doing research. They've got Mr. Baumgartner doing research. And they're coordinating, obviously, with the FBI or the CIA with these informants, because they're also producing information. Then they take all the stuff they put together, they feed it to Christopher Steele. He puts it into a different format, reworks it a little bit, puts his signature on it, and begins pumping it out all over the State Department, the FBI, the media, and everywhere else. Christopher Steele was just a turnstile. He was there to launder the intelligence. The author of the dossier was the guy who was paid to put together the dossier. Glenn Simpson. He's the author of the dossier. And how do we know that? Well, we know from what the evidence tells us, but I can do even better than that. How about his wife telling us that Glenn Simpson was the author of the dossier? Back in the summer of last year, I did a video where I read to you a tweet from an angry Mary Jacoby. That's Glenn Simpson's wife. She was angry because at that time, the dossier was getting a lot of play, and Christopher Steele was being heralded as this great British intelligence guy who was going to be the guy who took down Trump. The guy who took down Trump. And that made Mary Jacoby very angry, because as far as she was concerned, it was her husband that did that. She was mad that he wasn't getting credit, that everybody was patting Christopher Steele on the back and not giving her husband any credit, or her. And so she got on Facebook. Let's review her comment. Mary Jacoby, Glenn Simpson's wife, Facebook, quote, "It's come to my attention that some people still don't realize what's going on. Don't realize it's Glenn's work that was exposing Putin's control of Donald Trump. Let's be clear. Glenn conducted the investigation. Glenn hired Chris Steele. Chris Steele worked for Glenn." There you go. Glenn Simpson's wife telling us who's the author of the dossier. Hope you got that, Lindsay. First must get the dossier and totally destroy it and prove what it actually is. A piece of salacious garbage. That is everything that all the perps are relying on. Destroy the dossier, then they have nothing left to stand on to excuse what they did. Then you can take them all down one by one for the crimes they committed in trying to carry out the coup. That's my advice, Mr. Graham, Senator Graham. We got some time. Let's do Dumbass of the Week. Let's go through the... Oh my goodness. Let's go through these and see how everybody voted. Again, a very, very competitive week, and the same usual suspects being the most popular. Let's see. So we had... let's see who we got here. We have Brenda. She went for Tom Perez for Dumbass of the Week for banning Fox News from hosting the debates. Larry Lyons, love you, Larry. He said Ed Snowden for not realizing that John Brennan can reach out and touch him anywhere he chooses. You're absolutely right, Larry. You're absolutely right. Oregon, Darnell McPherson, of course, she's the politician that thought that the bee pollen was hate crime or something. Maybe she thought the bees perpetrated a hate crime against her. Kathleen thinks it's Ilhan Omar. Dennis went with Cortez. Spectre went with Cortez. Youngblood went with Rand Paul. That's a very good choice. Very good choice. I agree. I like Rand Paul, but in this particular case, he'd definitely be high on my list for Dumbass of the Week. Let's see. Who else? I didn't get the name here, but they also went for McPherson. Lincoln went with Cortez. Can't go wrong with Cortez. Wild-eyed Commie Cortez is always a good pick. Jonathan went with the freshman congresswoman. He just got them all in there, and that's a very, very good comment, Jonathan. Yes, you're right. The entire group of them are nuts. Gene went with Cortez. Dennis Shaw went with Cortez. Peter, he likes Omar. Madam Botox for second place, and Cortez. Let's see. Internet privacy advocate. Anyone that believes the Dems anyone that believes that the Democrats offer a viable alternative to Trump. Very good. Mrs. Miggins, she went with Tom Perez. Very good choice. Jeanette, her top three were Cohen, Schiff, and Pelosi in that order. Yep, solid picks. Patty went with McPherson. Regina went with Pelosi. Douglas went with Bernie for the dumbass of the hour for talking about the $15 an hour, knowing good and well it's a job killer. Let's see. But he believes Peter Lucas should be the dumbass of the week for writing that story. Yes. Mike went with Pelosi for trying to convince the public that Omar is too stupid to know that she's using anti-Semitic slurs. Well done, Mike. James, he went with McCabe. Very good choice. Thomas went with Cortez. And the sane environmentalist went with Tom Perez. So it looks like we had some pretty close competition here this week. The same usual characters at the top of the list. And I think you guys pretty much covered them all. I mean, I was torn this week myself, because obviously for just pure dumbassness, the mayor of Georgia there believing that bee pollen was, some sort of hate crime against her that's pretty dumb. That's pretty bad. It's pretty funny at the same time, and it fits right into the dumbass of the week. So I definitely McPherson would have been high on my list. Tom Perez certainly would have been high on my list because I can't think of a stupider move from a business perspective or even a political perspective. So I would have thought that McPherson and Perez would do very, very well this week. But the problem is it's hard to beat Cortez because she is literally makes 3 or 4 contributions a day. And then Omar is a complete, it's hard to beat them. And then Pelosi, when you got Pelosi, Omar, and Cortez in the game, it's hard for anyone else to score. But very well done, everyone who participated in this week's Dumbass of the Week. Again, it was a very close competition with those top 4 or 5 I just mentioned. But so I'm here to announce right now that this week's Dumbass of the Week, receiving the most votes, 8 total votes for this week's winner, Ocasio, Marty Feldman, Eyes, the Wild-Eyed Commie, Cortez. Winner this week, probably her 3rd or 4th win in this category. Cortez wins Dumbass of the Week pretty solidly. Madam Botox, Nancy Pelosi, Madam Botox, coming in 2nd place with a fairly good showing. She received 5 votes. So Cortez gets 8 votes. Pelosi coming in 2nd place with 5 votes. And then we have a tie. This is the 3rd week in a row we've had a tie. Last 2 weeks it was a tie for 2nd. This week it's a tie for 3rd. And this week, of course, it is a tie between McPherson, the Georgia mayor who thought that the bees launched a hate crime against her, didn't know what bee pollen was, and then, of course, Tom Perez, who his decision to not allow Republicans to do any debates is just stupid beyond belief and will definitely come back to bite him in the ass hard. He's really, really going to regret this. I assure you of that. I can assure you of that. So there you go. Cortez the winner, Pelosi coming in 2nd, McPherson and Perez sharing 3rd place for honorable mention. Win, place, or show, they're all there. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's TowerGate, or this day's TowerGate. Upload was a little late this morning. I got up this morning and something obviously happened. I lost my connection or something, and the video still had like an hour and 15 minutes to go, and then has to process and all that. So I don't know what time it actually uploaded, but I just went ahead and clicked publish and hoped it would upload. It appears that it did, obviously. So I'm not sure what time it uploaded. Probably, I'm guessing, somewhere around 10:30 or 11 o'clock or something. But yeah, so that's what happened, why the video was late upload. Hopefully tomorrow's video will be on time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you're paying attention, Lindsay. The dossier. Focus on the dossier first. Destroy the dossier. Expose who actually authored it, who the sources actually were. Once you do that, Lindsay, It's all downhill. You'll have them all in ankle chains in a week. Thanks so much. You guys have a good night. See you. Bye.